Without a doubt, one of the most common questions that I come across when talking to music producers and artists such as yourself is this: how do I finish more music? So if you've ever asked yourself this question, if you're constantly starting new projects but can't get anything past the finish line, or if you spend way too long on any individual track and start overanalyzing it, overproducing it, hyper-focusing on perfectionism and never getting anything done. If your frustration by this lack of progress really hurts your motivation, it makes you start to doubt yourself, don't worry, I've been there as well. And in this video, I want to share some of the best insights I've learned along my journey to really help you get tracks past the finish line without sacrificing quality. Hey yo, it's Alex from Meta My Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help you, the artist, produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their music in a deeper way. Cheers, let's grab some coffee, kick back, relax, and talk about how to finish more music. Before we dive in, I want to quickly paraphrase a quote from this awesome book called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, and the quote goes something like this: "There's a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't, and the secret is this: it's not the writing part that's hard, it's the sitting down to write that is difficult." And of course, we can replace the word writer with music producer, artist, musician, but the same concept applies to music production. All right, and the essence that I want us to take from that quote is this, is that everything in music production depends on taking action. So whether it is finishing projects, whether you want to develop new skill sets, whether you want to experiment and discover new sounds, it all depends on you taking action. And I know this might seem pretty obvious, but this simple truth is so easy to lose sight of in the ebb and flow of our daily lives, is that it's simply the more you show up to your studio, the more music you will finish. And with all this stuff in mind, it's very useful to set our focus on showing up to the studio consistently instead of focusing on finishing more music. And this might seem very counterintuitive, but there's a simple truth to this, is that the goal is to show up consistently in the studio. And if you do that, you will finish more music. However, if we flip that around and we focus on finishing more music, that goal will never happen unless you show up consistently in the studio. Right? And there's a lot of things that we can't control in the creative process, but one thing we can control is our ability to show up consistently. So the whole idea of this point is that you want to think of ways that you can ensure that you will show up to the studio consistently, even if it's for 10 minutes a day. How can you set that up in your daily life, in your schedule, to make that happen? The next thing I want to mention within the idea of taking action is the idea of consistency. So without a doubt, one of the most important skills you can develop in music production or anything that you do in life in general is your ability to be consistent in your approach. Okay, because in the totality of music production, there is a lot of skills to learn. There's music theory, there's playing an instrument, there's programming parts, arranging songs, compositions, editing, productions, mixing, mastering, all sorts of tools and plugins to learn, processors, etc. So no matter what skill set you're focused on trying to build right now, or what skills you would like to become more proficient at in music production, the truth is that all of your progress will come from taking action. In other words, all learning comes from doing. Yes, we can look at tutorials, we can learn more information, we can learn facts, but at the end of the day, there's a big difference between retaining information and gaining knowledge. Getting better in all of those skill sets depend on embedding the knowledge within you, not just retaining information. Because when you have the knowledge embedded within you, then you can call and draw upon what you need in the heat of the moment as you're working, versus always trying to refer to some information or something you read in a book. Because although that head knowledge is very useful, it will never be a prescription for what you're working on. And again, the best way to remember things is to practice them. So in essence, whatever you've identified as being the number one problem that you're focused on solving right now in your music, remember that taking action on solving this problem will be the quickest pathway to you overcoming that obstacle. So I want you to think about the ratio of how much time you're spending learning about music production versus actually producing music. And I've talked to a lot of music producers, and you would be shocked at the ratio of these two categories with most music producers. Most people spend like 80% of their time learning about music production and how to make music, and only 20% of their time actually making music. And I'm suggesting that you flip that around, that you spend 80% of your time making music, and then maybe 20% of your time learning about new techniques and tricks and tips. All right, and the third point I want to talk about in terms of taking action is this idea of inspiration. And I speak to a lot of people that they say they wait for inspiration before taking action, or they just feel like they perform better when they're inspired. And I completely agree with that when you're inspired and things are flowing and things are just coming out of you, it's almost magical how things seem to come together really quick. So I can understand that you might want to wait for those moments before taking action. However, the idea of inspiration is very fleeting and it comes and goes. You can't really count on it. You can't control it. So if we think about inspiration, it's kind of this fleeting essence of creative motivation that just comes upon us. We can't really count on it. We can't control it. It just kind of happens. So to base our actions on something that is extremely unreliable or unpredictable is not the best idea. If we flip that around, something that we can control is our ability to show up regardless if we feel inspired or not. You might be thinking, why would I want to work on music when I'm not feeling inspired? And I agree with you. The only counter argument to have to that is that you don't know what will inspire you. It's very likely that working on your music, working on something could inspire you to come up with new ideas, to finish your song, to move your song forward, to finish your mix, etc. And you can't know what will inspire you or not ahead of time. So all that to say is that inspiration comes to those who show up more often. And most likely, as you're engaged in making music, you're engaged with what you're working on, there will be more pathways for you to become inspired within taking action. All right, the second thing I want to talk about to help you finish more music is this idea of avoiding rabbit holes. So if you've been producing music for any amount of time, you know for sure that rabbit holes are this sinister beast that wants to rip your soul out right from the essence of your being and throw it in the garbage. Jokes aside, it's so easy to get lost in the sauce when we're producing music. If we're looking at our EQs, our compressors, we're browsing samples, we're editing MIDI performances, we're playing with all sorts of effects, we're tweaking tiny little things. And although I do believe that great art has great attention to detail, there is a certain point where you have diminishing returns. So with that said, you want to avoid spending all of your time changing things that will not matter to the listener. Okay, so when we're working on our music, we have to sometimes take a step back and really take on the mindset of the listener and get out of the driver's seat, because it's so easy to get lost in changing things that really do not affect the bigger picture and that no one will ever notice, right? And this is especially important if you're focused on tweaking things and going down rabbit holes at the wrong time of the creative process. So if you're falling down rabbit holes right in the beginning, right when you're starting to come up with ideas, you're starting to get a vibe, a kind of vision for your song, and you're going down rabbit holes of tweaking snares, you're tweaking sounds, you're changing presets, you're doing all of this stuff. If you're doing that, you're falling in pointless rabbit holes within the context of the whole creative process for your project. Because at that point of the process, the composition might change, the arrangement might change, you might add in new sounds. And at the end of the day, there's a time and place for tweaking and editing things, but it has to come within the right time of your creative process. All right, so to allow yourself to complete more projects and get them closer to the finish line quicker, you want to think in bigger brushstrokes when you're starting out a project. You want to get the general vibe, the general ideas down, the loose structure, maybe some of the key moments, the arc and the dynamics of the song, and really just think in big picture until you get to the editing phase where you can then shape and refine and orchestrate things to really bring it to that pro level. But just think about 80-20, like try to get the song 80% done in the least amount of time, and then focus on the editing stuff, the tweaking, the rabbit holes for that last 20%. So the second point I want to talk about in terms of avoiding rabbit holes is changing your mental filters, changing your psychology for different steps of the creative process as you move through them. All right, and this is so crucial because there are these things called convergent and divergent thinking. You can also see this as left brain and right brain thinking. One being more inside idea generation, being creative, being associative, experimental, trying different things. And the other one being very much refining, shaping, creating order, creating structure, having processes, and judging those ideas. All right, as we move through the creative process for music production, it's not always linear. We'll always be jumping back and forth to different phases of the project for whatever your song needs. However, in those different phases, you want to pay special attention to what is the goal of this phase? What am I focused on? Because if we don't have a clear mental state or a mental focus, a creative focus for what we're doing in a session, it can be so easy to fall down rabbit holes, to get confused. You know what I'm talking about. You end up tweaking kick drum EQs and scrolling through snare samples for half an hour and asking yourself what you're doing with your life. So all that to say is that you want to give some thought as to what mental state, what is the creative focus of whatever step of the process you're in with your music. And it doesn't have to be super rigid and religious. However, if you're just starting a track and you're coming up with ideas, maybe think about what key the song is in, what tempo you want to play at, what chords you want to play with, what sounds you want to play with, and then focus on creating as many ideas as possible. And that is all you're focused on for that session. And the power of shifting your psychology and your mental filters for different stages of the process is that you're going to be able to go way deeper inside each of those phases. So for example, if all we're focused on is idea generation and finding sounds to fit a vision, a vibe, all you're focused on is creating as many ideas as possible. You're not focused on editing them. You're not focused on judging them. You're not focused on arranging them at all. All you're focused on is on creating ideas. And what this is going to allow you to do is allow you to create way more ideas than you would normally if you were judging every single idea right off the bat. And then, for example, once you're completed some of that phase, then you can move on to choosing your favorite ideas and starting to edit and refine some of them, and then continuing to shape and refine some motifs that you found, and then starting to outline the basic structure of a song. And this will be so much easier with a plethora of ideas to choose from, instead of scrounging and trying to force good ideas out of just a few things that you've worked out. And the best way to keep you on track with those different states of mind, those different psychologies for the different stages of the creative process, is to have a creative system, right? Something that outlines the steps, that shows you what you can focus on, so then you can take those steps and you can shape and refine them to your artistic ear, to what you're focused on, to what you really want to express and play with at the moment. Make it your own, but having something that has your back to keep you accountable and to keep you on track to actually finishing those projects. So I've actually developed this really fun cyclical creative system that you can take, shape, and refine it to make it your own. And I've outlined all of those steps in a really easy to follow PDF. So if you're interested in grabbing that, you can find it in the description below. All right, the third thing I want to talk about to help you finish more music is what I like to call the hierarchy of quality. So real quick, the hierarchy of quality as I've defined it and what I teach my students is this. At the top of the pyramid, we have songwriting. The next rung down, we have performance. The next one is source sound. The next one is then processing. And at the bottom of the ladder is gear. Yes, I said it. Gear is at the bottom. And the reason why this hierarchy is so important is that all of these levels will have a different effect, a different amount of influence on your final product, on the quality of your music. So if we just think about the top, for example, your songwriting abilities, your ability to tell a story, your ability to take the listener on a meaningful journey that impacts them, to have ebb and flow in your music, dynamics, songwriting. Okay, so if we think about that, let's take a great song. So if you have great songwriting, that means that you are telling a story with your track, that your arrangement is top notch, that you create dynamics, that you're really creating a journey for the listener. And if you have that in place, that means that everything else in the process will be easier. Your mixing will be easier, your editing will be easier, getting really good performances to pop out and shine and really impact the listener will be easier, all because you have an excellent song. On the flip side, if you have a song that's lackluster and just doesn't have any of those elements, it doesn't matter how hard you try to mix it, how much you try to edit it, how much performance you put into it, what kind of gear you slap on it, it will still be a really bad song. So all that to say is if you're hyper focused on learning mixing skills and you're trying to learn more gear, you're looking at processing techniques, you're getting really advanced and really techie with all that stuff. And I'm not dissing that stuff is awesome. But if you're solely focused on that in spite of your songwriting, it's all in vain, because you can mix a really great sounding track that does nothing for people. How much music have you listened to out there that sounds great, but doesn't hit you emotionally? It doesn't have any replay value, and frankly, it's forgettable, right? On the flip side, think of how many legendary songs have stood the test of time because of the excellent songwriting, regardless of the production. And I know that we love to have top-notch production. We like to play with effects and all these trippy things, but always keep in mind that your songwriting will always lead the charge for all of those other elements to shine at their highest potential. All right, so now that we have an idea about that hierarchy of quality and how it could look like, the next thing to think about is what is the highest impact action you can take to help you finish more music. All right, so this is going to take a little bit of introspection on your part, but you really want to take a step back and think, where am I struggling? Where am I hitting walls? Where am I hitting roadblocks, obstacles in terms of getting tracks finished? So after you think about this might point towards something in that hierarchy of quality. You might be too focused on learning mixing techniques and learning processing techniques, focused on creating loops, and you're lacking in the songwriting and arrangement and learning how to revamp motifs and expand on ideas. So for example, if that was the case, then you might want to double down and focus on the elements that you're struggling with. So the songwriting, the composition, making parts work together, expanding on a motif, writing bridges, all of that kind of stuff is what you could focus on to help you get to the finish line, right? Another common example is that we constantly start projects and we fall off once we get a 16-bar loop, or we don't know where to take the song. Again, that points towards learning more about arrangement to help you expand on an idea and revamp a motif and expand ideas so that they're interconnected and they feel like part of a song. How to tell a story with the song points towards that, but that might also point towards a lack of a system and the fact that you're not consistent in your approach. Because if you're not consistent in showing up to the studio, then it's obvious that you're going to have trouble finishing projects. So in that example, if that was the case, then you might want to focus on building creative habits, building a system to help you take consistent action. Psst, check out the PDF. All right, so the final point I want to talk about in terms of the hierarchy of quality is, in lieu of finding those highest impact actions, maybe identifying some of the weaknesses, some of the places you're hitting walls with. On the flip side of that, you can really double down on the places you naturally excel at. So think about your existing skill sets. Are you an excellent songwriter and arranger? Do you have an ear for sound design and effects? Do you play a musical instrument? Whatever some of your top skills or your unfair advantages are, because if you can not only work on some of those weaknesses and some of the places you're hitting roadblocks with, but also double down on the things you naturally excel at, it's going to make it way easier for you to finish projects. Because for example, for me on guitar, I excel at playing guitar. I've been playing guitar for years, and I can come up with ideas, riffs, and chord progressions very easily and quickly on guitar versus something, say, like a piano. So in general, I will lean on the fact that I can come up with ideas quickly on guitar. And if you can find whatever that would mean for you, it doesn't have to be an instrument. It could be a technique. It could be a process. It could even be a specific phase of the creative process that you excel at, because then you can intentionally focus on using those strengths and help you finish music way faster by working with your natural skills that you already have, instead of trying to learn or force something that you're still trying to develop. Not only that, but in this world where everybody is producing music and it's extremely easy and affordable and available to everybody, which is great, the flip side of that, the con side of that, is that there's a lot of music out there. So the idea of finding your unique sound and cutting through the noise is going to become more and more and more important as we roll on. However, all of these things, showing up to the studio more often, more consistently, using a creative system, avoiding rabbit holes, learning about the hierarchy of quality, highest impact actions, your strengths, your weaknesses, All of this stuff really doesn't matter if you don't have proper goals set in the first place. So if you'd like to learn more about how to set a vision and meaningful goals as a music producer to get to where you'd like to get to with your music, definitely check out this other video where we dive deep into the process of setting goals the right way. If you got value out of this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay in tune for the next MetaMind Music transmission, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And with that said, I hope this was valuable, and I'll see you in the next video.